On today's Newsmakers, a Gold Star mom speaks out, a Christian hymn is reimagined, and horror in Nigeria. That and more coming up. Welcome to Newsmakers, a show where we go behind the headlines each and every week to bring you interviews with pastors, entertainers, politicians, and other notable news figures. On today's Newsmakers, we start the show with Christy Shamblin. Christy is a woman whose daughter-in-law, Marine Sergeant Nicole G., was one of the 13 American service members who were killed during the chaotic U.S. pullout from Afghanistan back in 2021. Now, she's joining us to reveal the shocking lack of response she says she's received from the Biden administration and from President Joe Biden. Let's welcome Christy to Newsmakers. Well, Christy, I appreciate you taking the time to come on with me. I know it's been a very hectic couple of weeks with the State of the Union. You were also at the hearing this week about the Afghanistan pullout. But before we get into any of those details, I want to start with Nicole, your daughter-in-law. And she was a Marine sergeant. She was one of the 13 lost during the terror attack that happened amid that chaotic pullout from Afghanistan. Again, before we get into those details, what can you tell us about Nicole and who she was?
Thank you so much. Sergeant Nicole G., my daughter-in-law, was a superstar. She was dynamic and amazing. She had a positive mental attitude, and she expressed that to everybody she came in contact with. She was incredibly proud of her service in the Marine Corps and her involvement at the Abbey Gate. She knew she was saving lives, and she was extremely proud. And there's nothing you want more for your kids than to have them be proud of what they're doing, you know. She was amazing.
You know, and as those events were unfolding and that pullout was happening, you know, take us back. I know it's painful, but I want to talk about just what it was like to see on the news what was going on, and then to find out what had happened to her. How did you process that?
It's a work in progress, I would say, still. You know, she was communicating with us, and again, just so proud of what she was doing. She was sharing with us the desperation that she saw there, and how proud she was to be helping those most vulnerable. So it was that strange, bittersweet feeling, because we're so proud of her and what she did and what she felt there. But then you saw on the news that it was chaos. It was collapsing. And what I think now is that they all knew that, but they were still there on the ground, proud of their job, given 100%. And that's the spirit of our armed forces. And we're very proud of them.
Heroes. I mean, these are heroes in the midst of an impossible situation. And you have been very vocal in speaking out, and, you know, you've done interviews, you've shown up, you were at the State of the Union, and, you know, making sure, and I don't want to speak for you, but from my vantage point, making sure that people are held to account and that people understand who Nicole and the others were, and asking questions of why this happened the way that it did. What was the State of the Union experience like for you?
Disheartening. It again, this bittersweet theme goes through all of it. I met amazing people, and we have amazing, honorable people in our system. They're being drowned out right now, and it's hard to see that happening. And you know, to what end? I just don't understand.
Yeah, I mean, when it came to when it came to the speech itself and President Joe Biden, what he delivered and what he had to say, what were you expecting? What was your take on what was uttered, being that you were there in the room?
You know, I have pretty low expectations these days. I wasn't surprised. You know, it doesn't flow together. It's not relevant what he's speaking about to what is in the room, to what's happening in the country. I feel like he's disconnected from what the people are concerned about. And it's hard to see that. I think that largely they've lost sight that, the people that fight these wars are young men and women who sacrifice their lives, and they don't get the respect. We don't even get attention from our administration, much less respect.
I don't always do this during interviews, but I do want to do it because I think it's important. And in the question I'm just going to close with for you is, how can people pray? Because there are a lot of people out there, they want to pray for your family. They want to pray for you. How can people be doing that? What are the things that they could be praying for as you continue to navigate this loss?
Pray to bring God back, bring him back into our government, bring him back into our military, bring him back into every aspect of our lives, because we have lost sight. And we can get it back. The people run this show. We just have to get stronger and more outspoken and remind the powers that be that we're watching and this is important to us.
Absolutely. Well, Christy, we would love to have you back anytime. Appreciate you taking the time to join us and discuss all of these important issues. And we will be praying for you on those things and for our country as well. Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Please continue to be praying for Christy and her family as they navigate this, as well as for America more broadly. We'll be back in just a moment with more Newsmakers. Welcome back to Newsmakers. Our next guest is worship leader Matt Redman. He's here to break down the history behind one of the most beloved hymns. He's also going to explain why he and other artists have decided to recreate and put out a new rendition of this powerful song. With no further ado, here is Matt Redman. So 2024 is the 75th anniversary of How Great Thou Art. I've got to ask you, you are one of the many artists involved in this new rendition of the song. Why do you think the song has resonated historically so much with people?
Yeah, it's a fascinating one because it definitely, you go around churches, different streams and expressions of church, you'd be hard pressed to find someone who doesn't find some kind of connection to this hymn. And I know as soon as it hit the shores of America, all those years ago with Billy Graham crusades and stuff, it just went like wildfire. And I think it might be because it has this beautiful story. It starts with creation, gets to the cross, but we get our chance to say what we think about those things. I think some of the best hymns, they're like a classroom and a chapel. They tell us something inspiring, educate us, inspire us, bring something to mind. And then they give us a chance to respond to that, say what we think about that. And this hymn does that. In the verses, it's like that classroom. And in the choruses, they're like this chapel where we get to express our devotion.
Yeah, I love that. You get to sort of learn and then ponder and worship, after that. And it's sort of all one experience. Where did this idea come from with the 75th anniversary to say, hey, let's get all these powerhouse artists together to do a new version of this beloved hymn?
Yeah, so normally some of these old hymns, you can do whatever you want with them. They're public domain. You can add a chorus, you can leave a verse out, chop and change bits up. But with this hymn, it's still under copyright, and the publisher is called Stuart Hine Trust. And they're very protective of it. Like normally, if you go and say, hey, I want to do this to it or change this up, they wouldn't permit that. And they actually, this trust where, they've been putting loads of proceeds for years into beautiful causes. And so they actually came to me and said, it's the 75th anniversary of the hymn coming up, but also what a lot of people don't know is all the words that we sing in this hymn, this English version, were written in Ukraine by a British missionary, Stuart Hine, where the trust came from. And so these words were written in the Carpathian Mountains of Ukraine. And so it seems like an especially poignant time to have a new version. So they said, look, the old version is what it is, and it will always be what it is, but could you write a new section and have a brand new version of this? And so, yeah, got together with a friend of mine called Mitch Wong, and we tried to rise to the challenge. Very, a lot of trepidation, messing with something that people love so much already is not something you take lightly. but we jumped
Yeah.
into it, and we felt like from the beginning, I think that we should have the word war in this hymn, and that feels like a strange word in a worship song or something for a Sunday morning, but actually that's the reality of life, right? And worship isn't meant to be escapist. So we're meant to face the brutal reality sometimes of our world head on, but then sing with grace and faith and hope over that. And so hopefully that's what the new version does. It's the new words, and as we walk this broken, warring world, we're going to pray, deliver us from evil, your kingdom come, and we're going to sing how great you are with hope in our hearts. And it was beautiful getting to write it, but then, like you say, when it really came to life, I was in the studio with all these other powerhouse vocals on it, Hilary Scott from Lady A, and Naomi Rain, Taya, Chris Tomlin, Blessing Offer. I mean, the list goes on and on. It was wonderful seeing it come to life.
Somebody like you, a lot of people, they create music and it's out there and it's popular and then it sort of goes to the wayside and people still listen to it. But when it comes to worship, that holds the potential to be, as you were just saying, something that stays with people for a very, very long time. And it's used in actual worship of God. So I would imagine there's a weightiness to that doesn't necessarily maybe exist as much in regular mainstream Christian music. What lessons have you learned? What are some of the biggest lessons you've learned? You've been doing this a long time now and have had a chance to work on a lot of incredible projects.
Yeah, honestly, lots of lessons. I mean, one of them would be like to put your own story in there, but not to such a detail that other people can't attach their own story to it, right? So you've got to be real and and so you're not faking it, right? But at the same time, if you're so specific to your own everyday thing, other people can't attach their own stories to it. So that's one thing. Universal theme in a unique way is a great thing for any songwriter, and sing about something that matters to people, that is relevant, that touches us all. That's biblical in if you're a worship songwriter. The universal theme, but try and find a unique way to say it. Try and find a fresh way in, whether it be melodically or lyrically. And honestly, the biggest thing I learned along the way is co-write. We're better together. Most things in the kingdom of God are designed to not be done as the Lone Ranger. When we get together and bring the best out of each other and lean into each other's strengths, it can be very special. And that definitely was the case with How Great Thou Art. From the co-write with Mitch Wong through to Matt Meyer and a guy called Steve Marcia producing it, through to those 15 friends joining in the studio. And actually, to be honest, all the managements and the labels all agreeing to it, all jumping into it wholeheartedly, saying we can take it to radio, all those little things. It's been a gigantic team effort. And that's probably the biggest lesson for me of always. We're designed to flow in community.
Well, very good. I really appreciate you taking the time, joining us and sharing. Again, it's How Great Thou Art. We all know the song. You've put a new version out and people can support Ukraine in the process of supporting that song. Thanks for your time today.
Oh, it's a pleasure to speak to you. Thanks so much.
You can go wherever music is sold for the new version of How Great Thou Art. This is Newsmakers on the CBN News Channel. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Newsmakers on the CBN News Channel. For our final segment, we are checking in on Nigeria. We're sitting down with Sean Nelson. He's legal counsel for ADF International. He is issuing a new warning about the dangerous developments, the anti-Christian bias that is raging on the ground in Nigeria. Let's welcome Sean to Newsmakers. Now, Sean, you are legal counsel for ADF International, and one of the issues that you're dealing with right now, and there are so many issues around the globe, this particular one is happening in Nigeria, where there are two different colleges and they're government schools that have reportedly banned Christian religious activities on campus. Tell us what's going on here.
Well, thank you for having me on, Billy, and I really appreciate it. The situation in Nigeria just generally is a very, very difficult situation for Christians in particular, especially in the northern part of the country. Nigeria itself, it's the largest democracy in Africa. There's about over 200 million people who live there. It's roughly equally divided between Christians and Muslims, with the northern portion of the country being predominantly Muslim, but with a significant population of Christians. And so a lot of times those Christians are pretty marginalized and face a lot of discrimination. And that's what we're seeing in these two universities. So you're absolutely right. These are public universities. One is a state university, one's a federal university in a state called Katsina. It's in the far northwest of Nigeria. There are Christian students there. It's actually a pretty high number of Christian students, some Christian faculty. And they, since I think 2017 for one of the universities and 2022 for the other one, there has been a ban on the Christian students being able to use any facilities for worship, for fellowship, anything like that. And the reason it's discrimination is that the Muslim students are completely allowed to use all of these facilities. In fact, there are mosques on campus. There are specific buildings for them. And in Nigeria, just like in a lot of places in the US or around the world, to accommodate different religious groups, the universities will build chapels or they'll build mosques or anything like that on campus. And that's the normal case in most of Nigeria. But in these two particular universities, they're not doing that. They're preventing Christians from using those spaces, from worshiping on campus, having fellowship. They have to go off campus to do that. It's just plain discrimination.
So they've locked doors, they've pushed them out of the buildings where they would meet, and they're allowing the other religious groups, the Muslims, the others, to meet on campus and to do what they would normally do, right? But the Christians are the only ones essentially unable to do that. Is that accurate?
That's right. I think the only groups that are allowed to use the facilities on campus are just Muslim groups. There's not too many other religious groups in that area. It's mostly going to be either Muslim or Christian or some African traditionalist religions, but that's a very small group. And so, so this really is something where it's very explicitly favoring one religion, in this case Islam, against the other religion, which in this case is Christianity. And that's just totally in violation of the Constitution. It's in violation of these individuals' fundamental rights. The Nigerian Constitution, it protects very explicitly the freedom of religion or belief. People are able to worship, practice, do all of those kinds of things. And again, this is something that you see in other universities throughout Nigeria, that Christians and Muslims both have worship spaces, both have fellowship spaces, and it's not an issue. But in this area, it's become an issue. It's a very unfortunate thing. And when you just think about what Christians are facing generally in northern Nigeria, the discrimination is really astounding to see it coming from these public entities, from these government-run facilities, one federal, one state. That's a really, really outrageous thing. And when you combine that with some of the targeted killings that Christians are facing all across the north, there's been hundreds of kidnappings recently, just the last couple of weeks. It's a really horrible situation for them, and this just contributes to that marginalization.
Well, you go back to 2022 when there was a stoning of a Christian college student at the beginning of that year. And that was really the first time I think a lot of people internationally, of course, people like you and ADF International and others are very aware of what's going on there. But I think that incident was one that woke a lot of people up, and they said, wait a minute, a Christian student was stoned to death. What is going on here? And as you stated, we've seen again and again and again, young people, families, people being abducted. This is horrific. And you mentioned a couple of things I think are important before we come back to this particular instance to talk about. This is a country that is very much, it's not like it's 90% Muslim, 10% Christian. There's a split where almost half of the country is Christian. Why has it been that this has been sort of allowed to fester in this way and grow in this way?
It's a really interesting question, and it's a difficult question, and a lot of it, I think, has been primarily because the government is not prosecuting people who commit these heinous crimes. So you're talking about Deborah Yakubu. She was a young 20s college student up in Sokoto State, which is very close by Katsina State, where these university cases are happening. And all she did, there was a class WhatsApp group. And all she did was respond to some of those messages. She mentioned Jesus. She thanked Jesus for one of her exams. Sometimes she did complain about some folks who used it more for kind of religious proselytization or something like that. But that's really all she did. And because that offended her Muslim classmates in that situation, it was about 50 of them, maybe more. They whipped up this huge mob, as you say, about 2 years ago, and they took over the school. They overwhelmed the security there. The police forces did not arrive to be able to help do anything, and they stoned her to death. They beat her, and then they lit her body on fire. And that became an international story because people got video of it, and it's horrific video of these attackers, a lot saying Allahu Akbar, that sort of thing, while she is on fire in the back. They arrested just two attackers, and they released them a year later for failure to prosecute. And so they are free. No one has been held accountable for that. No one is ever held accountable for any of these kinds of attacks. Over Christmas, you had, I think, at least 200 Christians who were slaughtered in a village in Plateau by militants who are driven at least in part by religious belief. And nobody's been found, nobody's in prison, nobody's arrested, nothing happened. So I think that impunity is a major, major part that emboldens the extremists to be able to take these kind of positions and do these kinds of actions.
Well, Sean, I agree, and I appreciate you coming on today to break it all down for us. Again, they can go over to ADF International for more information. Appreciate your time today.
Great. Thank you so much, Billy.
You can go to globalreligiousfreedom.org for more information on the state of persecution, not just in Nigeria, but around the globe. We'll be right back in just a moment with more Newsmakers. That's all for Newsmakers. Thank you for watching, and be sure to head over to the CBN News YouTube channel. That's where you will find the full interviews that you saw on today's episode. Plus, you can check out our new daily Newsmaker podcast. That's right, it is daily, Monday through Friday. We feature one full interview every single day. You can subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. As for this show, we will see you again next week.